Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Method to Our Madness podcast. My name is Stacey Merola, PhD, and I'm here with my co-host, Bill Pate.
Hello.
And today we are going to talk about different types of evaluation. So we're focusing on the purposes of the evaluation, not necessarily the different types of methodologies you would use for the different types of evaluation, but because that's going to be many, many episodes. So that
Yes, that could be a lot.
there would be a lot. But after this episode, we could potentially like dive into each one of these in more depth because there's a lot. There's a lot here. And this was fun to research because I thought I knew all the different types of evaluation, but au contraire. Like I did not. There are so many. And I'm not even sure if I've found them all, but there are some core ones that people use, but then there are also some other ones like developmental evaluation and some others that seem to be more new. And so, anyway, we're going to talk about this. And okay, so I think the core ones are, let's say, formative evaluation, which, is usually conducted during the early stages of a program. And I guess the classic example, I've discovered this came from, what's it, Michael, Michael Scriven? I guess, yeah, Michael Scriven was the original coiner of the phrase formative evaluation. And he developed it in regards to education. And that's sort of the classic example of formative evaluation where you have a curriculum and teachers are giving students like quizzes and then adjusting their maybe lesson for the next day based on the results of the quiz. And curriculum developers have actually incorporated this into their curriculum. So now, with electronic curricula, it's easy for them to sort of put in sort of a test and then kids can take it on, a computer and then, they'll get their results and then you get sort of the teacher would get data and how the students did and sort of real time feedback. And so then, you can adjust the curriculum accordingly. But, this could be implemented in other sorts of contexts as well. If you get sort of feedback from, stakeholders within your program, and then adjust the program accordingly. Dude, Bill's nodding his head.
Yeah,
I
do you have like a specific example from like your own experience of formative? I've got at least a couple, I think.
think I've got most of my examples are in education because I worked in that for so long. I don't know. Do you have one from outside of education?
Well, it's like education adjacent, I guess. So this was like a summer program at the Marine Biological Laboratory. The goal of the project was to increase diversity in neuroscience. And so the program had been going on since like 1988, but they finally brought in me as their first evaluator in like 2001. And so I think we were trying to set it up mostly as outcome, but we also wanted some formative stuff. So we built in some things where we surveyed the participants, which were like early doctoral graduate students. So early doctoral candidates, like first, second year.
Mhm.
So it was like this weird summer program where they learn these skills that you don't get in the classroom. So that's why I'm saying it's like education adjacent, because it was kind of directed at careers. And so the formative stuff that we had in place was just kind of like checking in with the participants about, what their perceptions were about the value of the summer program, like as it was happening, what they would recommend there to be like different, but then also checking in with the different instructors and the people who ran the project, what they thought about it. And then also checking in with the director of education at the MBL, because the summer program was like one of like 20. summer programs.
Hmm.
And so just kind of like getting feedback as it's going to figure out how we can do it better.
Right. Yeah. So that's sort of a key component of the formative evaluation is that the ongoing feedback as it's going instead of
Absolutely. Yeah.
getting it at the end. So,
Yeah. 5 years later. So what do you think?
what did you think about that? So,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I guess another one that can kind of happen, another type of evaluation that can kind of happen as it's going along, but sometimes you do it afterwards depending on the situation, is the process evaluation. So that's sort of focused on how the program is being implemented. So so you could be looking at how many people the program has served, and like does the program have, the wait times you expected? I don't know if you're like serving people food or something, and they're waiting in line, but also there's a fidelity of implementation.
Mm.
So that's like fidelity mean, how well was the program implemented in comparison to what you intended. So,
Mhm.
and there are different ways to measure fidelity of implementation. We could have a whole other podcast about that. We
We
probably
could.
should. We could, yeah. I probably should. So, yeah, but the process bleh, evaluation is related to the implementation of the program. So it could happen as you're going along with the program, as it's being, after it's started and you go along and see if it's been implemented, how it's being implemented. But sometimes it happens afterwards. I've done that
Mhm.
before. That was the whole, I don't know if you remember the Prison Rape Elimination Act
Oh
uh,
yeah. Priya.
evaluation. Yeah, that one was looking at implementation of the training program afterwards, after at the end, just to see if they had, how their curriculum had been implemented, and seeing, how many police officers they had trained, and so, and if it had aligned with what they had proposed in their grant proposal. So yeah, so we were looking at the process of it being implemented, not so much whether it had achieved its outcomes or not.
And was that like a 1 year project? I can't remember. Was it like a one cycle? It's like a okay, this is what we're gonna do. We did it, and now we're done. Or was it like a multi-year?
Yeah, it was a one and done type of
Okay.
thing. Yeah. So where they were training police officers and other folks in the corrections field to to reduce the rates of prison rape. So
Yep.
yep. But there have been other cases as well. We had to tack on a process evaluation. The client had originally wanted like just a summative evaluation, but
Hmm.
we didn't. They didn't really know like what had happened as far as like the implementation of the program. So you
Hmm.
can't, yeah. So you couldn't really look at outcomes so much until you really got a handle on like how it was implemented, like what was actually done in the program, like what types of activities they did. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's
yeah.
definitely important. So was that a situation where you did the summative and it's like, okay, we didn't find anything, and so then you needed to dig deeper, or did you just start out by saying, well, if we want to do that properly, we should also consider how it was done.
The latter, like if we want
Okay.
to do the summative properly, yeah, we really needed to know like what was done. So yeah. So we had to go back and do a process evaluation to see how many people attended various trainings, what trainings were given. And this was evaluation of cybersecurity policies. So like what types of policies were
Mm.
implemented, and so that sort of thing. And then we could see in the end, well, okay, if you for the folks that took the trainings, like what did they change their behavior because of taking the training? And so yeah, so that's sort of what. we did in that case. I know. Do you have any examples of process evaluations?
That's a good question. I guess it's mostly been formative, but because when you're brought in for the first time and nobody's done this before, so it's like, okay, well, what kind of information do we need to like make this better? But I think process that has been more typical for the larger projects that I've been on, where it's like a multi-year Department of Education funded project where it's kind of baked in to the process where it's clear up front that you need to do this. And so that was actually part of the proposal where we would look at the implementation, look at the fidelity of implementation, and some of it was this training put on by NCEE, and it was directed to principals and vice principals at these K through 12 schools and like a certain number of school districts. But it was like 18 months of training. And so it'd be like every other Saturday, and it'd be like an afternoon during the week.
Oh
And we
wow.
would just sit there and monitor the training. So we're like in the
Wow.
background, we're in these like Zoom, like the breakout rooms, and just kind of like listening in and checking how engaged the participants were, what kind of questions were being asked, how interactive the sessions were, and then looking at attendance records about, how often people showed up, were they showing up at the appropriate times and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's a good point. Fidelity of implementation is often required as part of an impact evaluation
Yeah,
because if the program wasn't implemented as intended, then that could be a reason you're not seeing the results that you
absolutely.
expected. So, yeah, understanding the implementation of your program is really, really important for understanding impact and other outcomes. So, but I guess that leads into impact evaluation, which happens at the end of the program. And I think it's confusing between impact evaluation, outcome evaluation, and summative evaluation,
Yes.
which all happen at the end of the program. Impact is definitely where, you link you link the program outcome, like you're looking at causality. So like you're
Hmm.
able to say, okay, the program caused this outcome. Or yeah, so that, you tend to have in order to do that, you tend to need to use a randomized control trial or quasi-experimental design with matching. So you tend to need a comparison group or a control group in the case of randomized control trials to be able
A
to
whole
show.
other
And
podcast.
that's a whole nother podcast. But anyway, the thing to understand right now is that the impact evaluation shows causality, whereas the summative and the outcome evaluation, they don't necessarily have that level of evidence of causality. I mean, it shows they both happen at the end of the evaluation, but it's sort of like, I guess the classic summative is that, you give kids, an achievement test at the end, could be a standardized achievement test. And, maybe you had a pretest measure beforehand, but you don't have the control group. So,
Right.
so you could see, okay, based on you could do some statistical analyses to see, if there's a difference between the pretest and post-test, but you can't say for sure that you don't have that level of evidence at the end, the summative, but you are trying to assess, did it have, can we say something about, the relationship between the program and these outcomes? So, and and then outcome evaluation. This is where it gets a little muddy, I think, between the outcome and the summative are really kind of linked, I guess. I mean, some of what I've read is that, summative might be performed at the end of a program or specific cycle. An outcome might be, short to short to medium, yeah, evaluating short to medium term results of a
Hmm.
program. So versus, maybe longer term. I guess we have to do it can imagine the logic model in your head.
Logic
So
models,
logic models need to do an episode on logic models, but
theory of change.
theory of change, yeah. So, the outcome might be looking at the shorter term, not necessarily the end of the program, but sort of,
Mhm.
I don't know, I guess like, okay, we've done it for, I don't know, a year or something. Maybe it's, and then we might want to continue with this, but let's see where we are right now. But yeah, it's a little bit confusing.
No,
Very-
absolutely. Yeah. I've seen some pretty elaborate logic models where, you've got your traditional like activities, outputs, outcomes, and you have like short term, medium, long term.
yeah, yeah.
But then
So,
they can become incredibly elaborate after that. Do they have cycles? Are they iterative? Do they lead to then another level of like logic model?
but again, with the summative and the outcome, you can't necessarily say impact. So, because you haven't conducted your RCT or your quasi experimental design with matching or really good, I think regression discontinuity would help too, or some sort of like, or longitudinal
Repeated measures,
European measures, interrupted time
interrupted time
series
series.
design.
Yes. Oh my
So,
God, all the things.
all the things. So, yeah. But yeah, so those seem like the core ones that you got. But when I was looking into this, there was like some adjacent, more specialized ones that sometimes people tack on to these, like the economic evaluation. I've been seeing that more, like a cost benefit analysis.
Oh yeah, cost benefit, return on investment.
Yes, exactly. So everyone wants to know, for the amount of money, I spent on this program, what's the return on investment? So
Absolutely.
I saw there's also something called developmental evaluation, which seems like it's kind of related to formative evaluation. The definition I found was that, it's developmental evaluation used in complex or rapidly changing environments where goals may emerge and change over time. So, I mean, maybe I guess one example I saw was like change, climate change is rapidly changing, you know, the environment.
Yep.
so, so, so we've got to adapt in real time. And so maybe development evaluation happens a little bit faster than the formative, so you could do continuous feedback, user feedback loops or something. But it seems like it's really related to the two of them, the developmental and the formative.
Yeah, that makes me think of
Um,
like how soon you expect to see outcomes for an intervention and like is it like a matter of days or is it like you're talking about earlier with the education stuff? I mean, realistically, that should take like a full year at least
yeah,
before you start to see some changes.
yeah, exactly. Maybe we should try and get someone who does developmental evaluation on the podcast. Tell us more. Um, Yeah, a needs assessment. So this would be conducted before a program begins. So to identify the problems and the gaps and, get feedback from your community. Hopefully you're engaging the community in this process,
Stakeholders
stakeholders, to really see kind of what kind of programming is needed
are wanted. Yeah.
or wanted. Yeah. I think we talked about that in an earlier podcast. But yeah, instead of just saying, "Oh, you guys need this," some of the, some external force saying, "Hey, we know what's best for you." Doing a needs assessment and seeing, yeah, exactly what's wanted, what do the people think they need and want. So you could conduct community surveys or focus groups, and then implement a program based on that, and then conduct your evaluation, conduct your process evaluation to see how it's implemented, and do your well, if you have the resources, do your impact evaluation, but you could do summative evaluation. Anyway, I just
Yeah.
designed a whole evaluation based on that description. Anyway, okay, there are ex ante and ex post evaluations, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if this is sort of like economic. Well, I guess not just economic forecasting. You could, I guess, an example I found of ex ante, you could forecast traffic impact, from a policy or even like if you put in a new stadium or something, see
Mhm.
what the traffic impact is going to be. And then the ex post, let's say you put your stadium up and then 10 years later you see, someone actually goes back and see, well, you know, was the traffic impacted to the extent we thought it was? Did the mitigation efforts help? Did we get more money because of the stadium here? Which is pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of simulation software, almost like AI or agentic. What is it called? I took a computational sociology course. It
Ooh,
was
cool.
weird. Yeah, we were using like old school AI, like before the current stuff, like stuff that was like developed in the 80s and 90s. But I remember simulation being one of those things that could be interesting to do. And of course, we've all experienced like when like developers come in, they develop like a whole like block or something,
Oh
and they do
yeah.
these simulations on like existing traffic patterns and what they anticipate the traffic patterns to change. And of course, they're like, oh, and it really won't change anything, according to our models. And then that can get challenged, of course, by like a neighborhood group who hires their own expert and shows,
Yep.
well, actually, if you have these other assumptions, it changes this other way. It's not like I went through that personally or anything. Uh, but yeah, so it is interesting how like technology or tools can be utilized to provide data or to help inform the potential impact of a project.
Yeah, and it's interesting. That's actually like I had been thinking about AI, like incorporating AI more into evaluations, and this is one place where it'd actually be really helpful because AI is very good at predicting. It's not so good at like looking at like your traditional regression where you're kind of looking at relationships between
Mhm.
everything, but like it's very good at prediction. And so I guess it'd be really good for your ex ante evaluations. I wonder how often people actually do the ex post. Like, do they, 10 years later, or, is there really, I guess you have to have the political will or the
Yeah.
people who put the money in. Like,
Yeah. How do
let's
you build
see.
in funding for that?
Yeah, exactly.
10 years
Okay,
from now, we expect this. Okay,
exactly.
sure.
Sure. Okay. 10 years from now, we're gonna have this pot of money to like. I feel like that might not happen as much. So, because that would be a lot of like, oh, your model is wrong. So,
Yeah. It turned out our assumptions were incorrect.
our assumptions were incorrect because people people don't always behave rationally. So if your model is based on a rational actor sort of assumption, then like, anyway, we're not here to talk about economics. Okay. Performance evaluation. I mean, I guess this is evaluation, but it's sort of like looking at, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but if you're looking at performance of your workforce unit or your organizational unit or something, I mean, people, I mean, yeah, could do performance evaluations. And I guess that ties into performance monitoring and sort of, where you're kind of seeing, you're setting up goals and you're seeing whether your organization is meet or your unit or whatever your, case measure is, are you meeting your goals? Yeah. So that's that, I guess. And I think we've all experienced that if you worked in the corporate world at all. So,
Yeah.
so I found something called principles focused evaluation. If focus The evaluation focuses on principles which in turn inform and guide stakeholder choices and decisions. So which is kind of interesting. The principles for evaluation are determined from stakeholder experience, values, expertise, and past research. So, are the principles that the people are acting based on, are they actionable, clear, and meaningful? I guess so. I guess if you have like I was trying to think of an example. Like, I guess if for your business, you want to make sure you've got a mission statement that kind of guides, your behavior as a business. But I get, yeah, other organizations have that too. So like,
Yeah.
your
And
mission
even
statement,
evaluators have
and even actually,
yeah.
yeah, we've got a mission statement too. Yeah, so so are folks, so folks behaving in line with those principles that are outlined. And so, and is your organization as a whole, I guess, behaving in line with those principles? So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then I found something called utilization focused evaluation.
Yes.
Um, oh, you've heard of this one? Okay, yeah, it's
Well, yeah,
mainly
I've got the giant Michael Quinn patent book on utilization focused evaluation. Every
you
now
wrote
and
a
then
whole wow, you wrote a whole book on it.
he wrote a whole book on it. It's this is the fourth edition. It's like
Wow,
600, yeah, over 600 pages.
that that's a lot about making sure people are using their reports. Like that's a lot.
He is thorough.
That's thorough.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's mainly like the use. That's a lot to write about the use of. I'm gonna have to check that out. Some evaluation. Yeah, because you don't want, your evaluation just sitting on the shelf somewhere. Like you write this big report and then it just sits on the shelf. And, people never do anything with it. They're like, oh, I checked the box. I got my evaluation and proceed on their merry way. But it'd be interesting to see what Michael Quinn Patton has to say about how getting people to use their evaluations. I know there's a lot of emphasis on making sure that, reports are accessible and also trying all these different things to like get evaluation results out there, either doing like infographics or, data visualization is a big deal. Making sure you've got pretty easy to use, easy to understand graphs, with the thought that if it's more accessible to people, maybe they're more likely to use it and implement these
Mhm.
things. But yeah, have you read any of Michael Quinn Patton's book about what he
I've
what he does?
only accessed it as needed when I've thought about something. And I think the reason why I got the book was at some point I was on a project and I think the person that I was working with, they had like cited it, or maybe it was even in the RFP or something. And it's like, oh, well, I don't have an MQP book yet on my shelf. I should get that. And so
Yeah,
then I got it. And yeah, it's not one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm going to sit down and just read through it. I just kind of, as I've needed to, gone back to it and just like, cited things as like justification for a particular like proposal or something. But yeah, it should, you're absolutely right about the whole like when you're reporting out stuff and making sure that it's useful. I've definitely seen projects where there's an emphasis on making sure that it's accessible, readable for not only the folks who funded the project, but also any of the stakeholders who might be interested in it. So, like for an after school project, making sure there's like a slide deck or a very basic, like 2-page report that like parents and teachers can access and so they can see what the outcome was of, their participation in a project or as kind of like giving back for their participation, showing them like how the information was used and it gives them, a big picture view of their their contribution to the project.
right. And then there are some other ones that I've seen, and written about actually a little bit. Like, but these are things that you would use, you can use as part of other evaluations. So, like equitable evaluation, making sure you're looking at the effects of the evaluation on different parts of the population.
Mhm.
but that's sort of an approach you could take within your impact evaluation or so it's just making sure that you're looking at power dynamics and effects on different subgroups, such as by race and gender, rural versus urban, disability status, those sorts of things. But also, I've also come across RFPs that call for theory-based evaluation, which basically is, you know, and we think about evaluation as being distinct from research in that, we're not sort of testing theories, but theory-based evaluation is basically like another way of saying, do you have your logic model and your theory of change, and are you sort of,
Mhm.
you know, using that to guide your research questions and the data that you're collecting. So yeah, so it's just, I mean, I feel like we all do that anyway, but
Yeah, no, absolutely.
so, but it's interesting how people put like need to put a name on it, like we're calling this a theory-based evaluation. But yeah, there might be more. There, there might be
Oh,
more.
I'm sure. I'm sure a lot of people have come up with variations or reinterpreting or
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, this can make it pretty confusing for folks that are trying to enter the field. It's like, wait, what's that? And even when I was reading through some of the materials, like the definitions were slightly different in some cases, between different websites and, so it's like, okay, well, we don't have like one standard definition for some of these things. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, even that distinction between evaluation and research, I think people were trying to make such a big deal out of it back in the day. I don't see it so much happening now, but like a lot of the evaluation work that I've done, I see it as like applied research
yeah,
where, people are trying to understand something or they're trying to understand the impact. And so it's like, okay, well, if we set it up as like a quasi-experimental design, because we can't do random assignment or, the choice has already been made and there isn't random assignment, it's just based on priority, then it's like, okay, so how can we understand this? And I think that's where our backgrounds in social science really prepare us for this type of work where we can, we've got like our tool boxes or tool belts
yeah,
with, say, well, I could do some, structured interviews, I could do some surveys, I could use regression on on the end data set. And so we kind of cobble together what we think is the best approach, I guess,
yeah.
to answering the question or to meet the needs of the client.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what John Hitchcock in our earlier episodes talking about, realistic or pragmatic approaches, so we're trying to answer the research questions and the needs, not so much like we're not taking a sort of, we don't have some sort of paradigm or whatever worldview.
Paradigms, yes.
Yes, the paradigms. Oh my God. All right. So I don't know. Maybe we could get Michael Quinn Patton on here to tell us more about utilization focused evaluation. If
That'd be great.
anyone wants to hook us up with Michael Quinn Patton, we'd love it. Okay, so I guess we'll see you next time, and thanks for listening.